What's going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with a little hot spot jig today. So I've got a size 16 Hanak H400 BL. These are really small hooks. This is a smaller jig for sure. But I used, again, I really like having the heaviest bait possible when I'm fishing through the ice. And so the biggest bead that I can fit on here that doesn't necessarily crowd this eye too much, I've got a slotted 9/64 fire hole just in matte black. I've got just a couple turns of lead 0.015 wire just to hold that bead in place when I'm tying. I've got just a little bit of dubbing on here. It's just kind of your standard synthetic black. So I saw that picture a couple months ago and I ordered these easy shrimp eyes, and I do really like these. I actually tied one, and again I'll show you at the end, but the monofilament is just a little bit too thick. So what I ended up doing, I think this is 10-pound monofilament, and I just melted it down and just dipped it myself, because what was happening was the monofilament was just too thick and my body was just getting too bulky. And so the smaller monofilament means I can have a thinner body. And then really just for the ribbing, I've got black UTC brassy size, but a really simple pattern, definitely an attractor with this hot spot orange. I saw somewhere, I saw a picture on Pinterest and it said that this fly is banned, but I'm sure it's not in Minnesota. So you could also easily tie this on like a nymph hook if you want to fish it vertically. I'm tying these to fish them horizontal, but these would be, I think, just as effective if you fish them vertically in the water. But enough talking. Let's tie it up. Now before I start putting my thread down, I really want this bait to be thin. So I'm just gonna wrap back one time with my 70 denier. Trim off my tag. It's super easy to bulk this bait up. So I'm going to come down into the bend, then I'll come back up right to kind of where the barb would be. This is a jig hook, so there's no barb on it. So I've got my tail, or whatever you want to call it, and however long I want this to be, I mean, I could extend it way out here, I could put it right up on my hook. So I want it to be maybe about a half of a shank length. I don't want it too long, but I also don't want it too short. So I've got a little bit extra that I'm just going to trim off, just about this much, and I'm going to push it right up against my lead. And all of this mono, it's going to help keep it a really smooth body. I'm going to go right up against my lead. And this mono, if you don't get it perfect, you can always, this mono has some memory, so if you stretch it one way or the other, you can kind of just bend it. So this is the length I'm going with. Again, you could do a 6-inch one, you could bud that thing right up to the hook. That's totally up to you. I'm not even going to wrap back. I'm going to take my brassy size black UTC, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to push it right up against that lead, and I'm going to do just a couple wraps, and then I'm going to make sure my thread is as uncorded as I can really get it. And then with this, kind of holding on to my monofilament, I can come as far back as I want. I'll come back maybe a little bit more, maybe right down, maybe a little past where my barb would be. And then again, I can kind of play with this. It wants to get pushed down, but I can push it up, I can push it to the side, I can do whatever I want. That's the kind of the easy thing about this. So I've still kept this body pretty thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come right back up. I'm going to do touching wraps. You could also use small wire. That would help keep that body small as well. And I'll just build up a little bit right here, right at the top. My dubbing and stuff is going to go right here anyway. And then I can just start wrapping my UTC. I'll get my thread out of the way. And I'm just going to do touching wraps just to make sure. I just want to make sure that that first wrap or two isn't going to mess with that monofilament. And I want these touching as well as I can. You can almost just butt it right up to the previous one and it'll slide into place. I'm going to go all the way up, even though my dubbing is going to cover, I don't know, maybe 20% of this, of these wraps. I'm running short on that. You use a lot more. It's kind of like a copper john. You use a lot more wire than you think. So that should be plenty. I can get my wire taken off. I'll just, the 70 denier I always do. Probably more wraps than I need to. Not worried about crowding an eye or anything, so just security. And I can just helicopter this off. It's too little to save, so I'll just discard it. So now I've got my SLF blend. And you can always add more, you've heard me say that. This is just a typical synthetic. I didn't want to do something really buggy. So I'll get that on there. And I'm going to be really careful with how many wraps I do. I'm just going to kind of push it all the way up because it'll slide down on its own. And I'm just going to whip finish right here, but I'm just going to do like a 2-turn whip finish just because I'm going to put on more thread. And now I'll grab my glow brite. It doesn't really say what color this is. Shade number 4. It looks like a 4. Whoever wrote that has messy handwriting. So I'm really just gonna do enough wraps to secure it to there, and then I can trim this off super close, and I'm just gonna whip finish it because I don't want to build up a big collar. I just want the color. So I'll just do maybe 3 turns on that. Tighten that up. Trim it real close. And I kind of want to flare some of this. You can see, I don't know if you can see, it's pretty flared out a little. But if I take my little eyelash brush, Velcro to me on something like this is just too aggressive. This is really light, and it's going to be kind of crazy, but I'll just trim. I'll trim off the really, really wonky stuff. The stuff that's really long. And I could probably spend quite a bit of time getting really nitty-gritty with this, and I don't want to do it on the video because you don't want to watch me do this for 10 minutes. But it's kind of like a double attractor, right? This tail is going to call fish in, but this collar you're going to be able to see from a mile away too. There's a bunch of different patterns that you can do. I mean, the blue easy shrimp eyes that I actually bought, that kind of gave me the idea for this. Well, it was a picture on Pinterest too, but this blue is really, really nice. Not quite as aggressive as that orange. And then you can't go wrong with a really bright chartreuse. You can play around with how much dubbing you want to put on, what color dubbing. You can change up the bead color. I mean, there's a million ways that you can tie these things. But again, A really easy tie, really quick. You can get super creative. Like and subscribe. Junior's Fishing Company. See you on the next one.